We're at Morne Airport in Botswana, and today, something special. We're going to be taking a flight from a newly released aircraft from SimWorks Studios. It's the Kodiak 100. And to get straight to the point, it's the best single-engine turboprop yet released for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Not only is the texturing the best we've seen from any third-party developer to date, but the attention to detail is, well, it's extraordinary. And for this high-wing, single-engine turboprop, well, the flight model is excellent. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney PT6A, this aircraft has amazing STOL capabilities, short takeoff and landing. Carrying passengers and cargo, it's the go-anywhere aircraft. We're going to take a short hop to a bush strip further north. A warm welcome to the Sim Hangar. My name's Mark. Thanks for watching, and let's get started. Up to this point, the Piper Arrow 3 from Just Flight held the crown. Well, in the GA category, meet the new king. It's available from various retailers as well as directly from SimWorks Studios. And at a cost of Euros 29.99, it's real value for money, as not only do you get this excellent aircraft, but it comes in a number of varieties and configurations for cargo and passengers, and a box full of different liveries. Two options for the undercarriage, the standard wheels, as well as the slightly larger Tundra option. For each variant you get a number of different configurations for the interior. This is the Executive or Summit option. There's also the Tundra option, kitted out to carry more passengers. As you would expect, there's a cargo variant, all variants having the large back bay door, a mixed variant which allows you to carry passengers and cargo. And there's also a skydive option. The attention to detail and modelling of the animations throughout is excellent, and the skydive door is no exception. This is one of the first aircraft in the sim, I believe, where the load and weight of the aircraft and centre of gravity has a direct impact on the flight characteristics and handling of the aircraft. You need to make sure you load your aircraft correctly and keep the centre of gravity between the two white lines. If you don't, well, you're likely to run into trouble, and takeoff's even more challenging than what they are. In keeping with SimWorks Studios' attention to detail, as you load up the aircraft with passengers and cargo or both, I'm currently using the mixed cargo and passenger variant of the Kodiak 100. You get a graphical representation, and a good one at that. Let me just shrink this menu and I'll show you what I mean. Let's start off by adding some weight and some passengers. Rows 1 and 2 are for passengers, and after that it's cargo. I think we'll go for 3 passengers today. Welcome aboard. Make yourself comfortable, please. Let's just add somebody to the right here, and somebody in the second row as well. And once we've done that, well, I think we'll add some cargo. At the bottom of the load sheet there, you can see maximum weight and our current loaded weight. We're still good. We're heading today to a safari camp bush strip, taking a few tourists and a few boxes of medical supplies and fresh vegetables. The quality of the modelling of both the passengers and the cargo is very good indeed. Just stretch the menu out again so we can check. Centre of gravity looks okay. We're not overloaded. I think that's enough for now. Welcome on board, and please fasten your seatbelts. Time to check on our cargo and close the rear bay doors. There's click spots for both the top and bottom doors, and the animations, well, they're just super smooth. Doors are closed. Let's now lock them in place. We're done. We're loaded up. Let's head back to the cockpit. We can now close the pilot's door. Now it's time to get this thing started, and let's get away. Included with this aircraft is a comprehensive set of checklists covering all phases of flight, from pre-flight inspection all the way to shutdown. I'm not going to run through it item by item, but this is my startup workflow. Master switch on and avionics switch on. Whilst waiting for everything else to come alive, just check my parking brake quickly. Make sure that that is on. It's a powerful engine, and if not on, well, you can start to creep forward without realizing it. The next step, let's get our fuel on. That's done on the overhead panel. And we need to turn on both the left and right hand wing tanks. and we do that by simply sliding the lever over to the on position. Next we push down the firewall fuel lever, and before startup check our throttle quadrant. Emergency lever is full down, throttle is at idle, prop is all the way back in feather, and condition lever is in fuel cutoff. Flaps are 0. That's done. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention quickly. Just to the left of the MFD is your standby indicator. By hitting the menu button you'll see it covers a multitude of different actions as standby, but it is an FPS hog. It costs me up to 10 FPS. The circuit breakers are working and pop out number 3 on the bottom row, and as you see it switches it off. I'm sure the developers will mod this in the future, but for now, if you're suffering FPS wise, pop it off. I am using the Garmin NXI mod, available via the marketplace, now just popped on the map display. Let's now continue with our startup flow, and next we just want to check that we've got enough battery. We should have a minimum of 24 volts, that's showing 25, so all good here. Click on back to give us the primary display again. Next let's put on the beacon light so people know that we're on board and we'll be moving shortly. And now to switch our auxiliary fuel pump to on. Note the center position is standby and all the way up is on. With the fuel pump on we can now move our prop lever out of the feather position. Once that's done we can now put our ignition switch on and we're about ready for start. Check the prop is clear and then move the starter switch down to the low position. The prop will start to turn and we're watching the NG gauge there and we're looking for 14% or more, and as soon as we have that we can move our condition lever into low idle. As you can hear, the developers have paid a lot of attention to the sound authenticity for this aircraft. We just wait a little while, don't let the NG stabilize, something between 52 and 57, and we can take a quick look at our fairly straightforward route today. We'll be departing morn, flying VFR at an altitude of 9,500, and we'll be heading about 50 or so nautical miles north to a dirt strip at a safari camp, Chiefs Camp, Foxtrot Bravo November Alpha. Morn is a single runway airport with asphalt surface and it's a fairly long runway, so at this point we need to decide what runway we're going to use for departure, and we'll do that in a minute or two. We just need to finish our startup flow. Nav lights can now come on, we can now turn our ignition off, and the same for our starter. Our auxiliary fuel switches move to the center position, the standby. Generator switches to on. And now we can move our prop lever fully forward. Auxiliary bus is switched to on. This will turn on our air conditioning, and this is an area of detail that has not escaped SimWorks Studios. We can see it's fairly hot at the moment, 34 degrees C. Now switching on the air conditioning for the pilot and also for the passengers. Now going to select a temperature that's a little bit more comfortable. I think something around 21 degrees should be fine. And watch what happens when I put it on auto. See the fans automatically go to full boost to bring the temperature down. I've also noticed when you open the doors it affects the ambient temperature. Amazing attention to detail, I just love it. Okay, we're about ready for departure. Let's just check which runway. I'm using live weather today. Let's just check the METAR quickly. Wind is 7 knots at 340 degrees. It's clear and visuals okay. And the QNH is 1016. So now we know what the weather is. We can just now quickly check which airport we want. Just check any handy charts available. I use Navigraph so I can check in sim. Morn in Botswana, Morn International. That's the one I want. I'm going to choose the taxi tab and check the airport. So it's runway 26 or runway 08. So 26 it is. With the current temperature I don't really need to set my pitot heats, but I will do it just for the sake of this tutorial. Both are now on. we're about done, we're ready to taxi, so we'll put our taxi lights on as well. I have these mapped to my honeycomb yoke. According to the checklist, we now need to lock in our inertia reel levers. These fasten the seat belts and prevent excessive movement. That's now done. Air conditioning has now brought the temperature down, and we can either close or position the vents to suit. And lastly, before taxi, we can just check that our flight controls are free and clear, which they are. We're now ready for taxi. If you're using the Honeycomb Bravo throttle quadrant, I've done a short video on how to set up the power lever, prop and condition lever for use with the Kodiak 100. Link to that video will be in the notes below. Getting trim set up for departure is very important in this aircraft. We've got aileron trim, elevator or stabilizer trim and rudder trim. You need to pay close attention to rudder and elevator trim. The torque of this engine has a strong pull to the left, so a fair amount of right rudder is essential. On your central Garmin unit is a rudder trim indicator on the bottom, and you need to be fairly liberal with the amount of right rudder trim before takeoff that you apply. The developers recommend anything from 30 to 50%. I've set mine today, I'm not that heavily loaded, at about 30%. Kodiak also has a fairly strong nose-up tendency, so you need to give it a bit of down elevator. And I normally set mine just about there, perhaps just a little bit more. And note I loaded my cargo as far forward as I was able to keep the center of gravity in the center as much as possible. Whilst I'd normally do this for taxi, I might as well show you now. Takeoff flaps is 20%. That's set, we're just about ready to go. Once again, to highlight the attention to detail, here's the flaps moving from one of the passengers' viewpoints. You can see that the flaps are well modeled. Not only do they come down, but they also rotate. It's attention to detail like this that has made all the difference and sets this aircraft apart. We're ready to go. We've had clearance to taxi, so we can now take our parking brake off and start heading to our departure runway. For ground movements, we keep the condition lever in the low idle position. Just a touch of throttle and she'll move forward on her own. Once she's moving back to idle, and you'll find that she slowly picks up speed, so there's a need to dab the brakes every so often. Last few checks before we move on to the runway. Quite a bit of sunlight, so I'm just going to turn up the brightness for the displays. That's a little bit better. Strobe light can now come on, and our landing lights can come on, and our condition lever is now moved to high idle, and we're clear to line up on the runway. Just check the runway's clear. That all looks okay, we're clear to proceed. We'll come to a stop on the runway and a last minute check of our P's and T's, make sure everything's in the green and everything there looks good, so that's okay. Now I'm slowly going to increase the throttle. With the manual they give you a schedule of the maximum torque that you can apply. I allow the revs to build up before releasing the brakes, and now the big challenge is to have a decent takeoff. I'm looking to rotate at about 65-70 knots. Airspeed is alive. I think I've got a little bit too much right rudder in, so just feeding in a bit of left rudder to help compensate. I'm over 70 knots, so rotate. Don't pull her up hard, be very gentle, and I'm yawing a bit here, so feeding in a bit of left rudder to try and compensate for the slip. There we go, that's much better now, more stable. The clicking you can hear is me adjusting the elevator or stabilizer trim. When flying this aircraft you need to keep one eye on the slip indicator. Getting the line in line with the arrow indicates that you've got coordinated flight. This is your slip indicator here, but don't try and align it when you're turning. You need to do that while you're level. I'm now feeding in some left rudder here, and you can see the line starting to move under the arrow. That's more efficient flying, and I'm not yawing left or right. Flaps up 1 notch. I've been cleared for 9,500 feet, so just dialing that in. We'll hand fly the departure before moving on to the autopilot. Flaps are fully up. Want to climb at about 90 knots or a little bit more. Now slowly turning north to head back on track. We've climbed about 1,800 feet and I'm now pulling back on the prop. You'll hear the tone of the engine slightly change. Just checking my RPM and pulling back on the prop. I'm looking for about 2,000. Anything between 2,000 and 2,200 is good. There's 2,000, that's great. As I climb I'll need to keep an eye on that and need to adjust it as we go. Landing lights can now come off, and so can my taxi lights. As you fly, and even if you're on autopilot, which I'm not, I'm still hand flying it at this stage, you need to keep an eye on the slip indicator and adjust your rudder trim as you go. We've now entered the Okavango Delta, an area famous for its wildlife, and I'm flying in the Okavango scenery from the same developer, SimWorks Studios. It's very realistic and highly recommended. Available direct from the developer or also in the InSim marketplace for Xbox and PC. I've done 1 or 2 videos of flying in the Okavango. I'll leave links to those videos in the notes below. Coming up on 8,000 feet, transition level in Botswana is 7,000 feet, so barometer should be set to standard, and I'm now going to switch to autopilot. Autopilot is on. I'm also going to put the yaw damper on, and I've now switched to nav mode, and the aircraft will now align itself with the GPS route. There we go. Just checking my slip indicator again. Flight still seems coordinated, all good. Still climbing to my desired altitude of 9,500 feet, so just putting on vertical speed, and I've just changed the vertical climb to 800 feet per minute, so we'll be at cruise in just over a minute's time. Just hitting cruise now. Aircraft is leveling out, pushing the throttle forward a little bit. At this altitude I'm more constrained by NG than ITT. We're now stable at cruise. Time to just check on the cargo and the passengers. Yep, they're looking suitably nervous. Although this aircraft is not pressurized, it does have oxygen. And yet again, it has been well modeled by the developers. That's our oxygen switch there. We can turn that on, and it's got an indicator in terms of how much oxygen is left. And although I haven't tested it, I'm told that the depletion will depend on the number of passengers on board and whether or not you've got a co-pilot as well. However, typical altitudes for this type of aircraft would be between 7,000 I guess and about 14,000 maximum, perhaps a little lower. Because I'm talking, and probably too much, you can't get the full benefit of the wonderful sounds. Let's just open this window. It's great when you're flying by yourself and you turn the volume well up. Whilst we're at cruise, here's a little something you may or may not know about the NXI Garmin. We're flying to a bush strip, there's no approach or any other data available. Even Navigraph doesn't have any data on this strip that we're flying to. But to help you find the airport and navigate your way successfully to the runway, you can set up a dummy approach. Press prog, then select approach. And it gives you an option of either visual runway 06 or visual runway 24 for this strip, Mombo Camp Airport. Because of the prevailing winds at the moment, I'm going to choose, I think, a visual runway 24. I then have the option of vectors or straight in. Well, I'll have to choose straight in for this. Just turn the top dial to select, and after each selection, hit enter. You then have the option, you don't have to set this, but to set a minimum approach altitude, I'm just going to set it for 500 feet. That's done, hit enter. Now use the larger wheel at the bottom to page all the way down, and we're looking for activate right at the bottom. Hit enter, it'll ask for confirmation, hit enter again, and it has now adjusted the GPS course to accommodate a straight-in approach, runway 24 for this airport. Quite a handy feature and very useful if you're not sure where the airport is, or you're in weather that's slowly getting worse, or visibility is restricted, VFR or IFR. Just click on flight plan to take you back to the main map, and we can just have a quick zoom in here. And there it is. Quite a handy feature. I've now started my descent towards the airport, which is just over 20 nautical miles away. I pulled back on the power lever and set my vertical speed to descend at 1,000 feet per minute. The runway is at about 3,100 feet, so I've set an altitude of 4,500 to level out at. And of course I want to level out well before the turn towards final. I'm going to keep my descent speed between 130 and 140. Now reaching my selected altitude of 4,500 feet and starting to level off, and just pushing forward on the power lever a little bit to maintain a decent speed. Again, I'm in no hurry, about 130 plus is plenty for me. I'm about 5 nautical miles away from the airstrip, and I want to make sure I'm well within the flap deployment speed by the time I approach final. I think that's the airstrip there at about 2 o'clock. Yep, that looks like it. Flaps going down 1 notch, 10 degrees. Speed 120 knots, that's fair enough. Prop lever now fully forward. Still on autopilot, so it's turning me towards the runway for final approach. I'll wait till I more or less line up and then I'll hand fly it in. There's no METAR information available for this airstrip, so I'm going to stay with standard 1013 or 29.92. Autopilot is now off. Flaps down to 20 degrees. SimWorks Studios have done a great job on the Okavango Delta scenery, one of my favourite places to fly. Looking for an initial approach speed of something in the region of 90 knots or so. Flaps now 35 degrees all the way down. Landing lights on, can be a bit awkward, it's 2 stages, it's all the way up. Altitude looks okay. I'm just going to let the speed start bleeding off now by raising my nose and just controlling my descent slightly, having to feed in right rudder to maintain coordinated flight. A little bit of a crosswind. 80 knots, just where I want to be. Now easing off on the throttle. We're down, it's 65 knots, and now I've got plenty of runway, but gonna use reverses anyway. "25 to 30 knots coming out of reverse. Flaps all the way up. Condition lever to low idle. Well, it looks like the Land Rover is here for our tourists, ready to whisk them away. We'll come to a stop and then apply parking brake and prep for shutdown. Landing lights can come off, as can our strobe lights as well. We can now turn off our air conditioner. We'll shut it down first on the control panel before switching off the auxiliary bus. That's it shut down. And now to the auxiliary bus switch, and that's off. Avionics off. Now we can complete the shutdown. Condition lever to fuel cut off. As the engine slows, the prop is moved back to the feather position so that the propeller feathers, and we can see that it's feathered nicely there. Nav lights now can come off, and both generators can be turned off as well. This will shut down our panels and so the master switch off. We're done. All we need to do now is unload. Open up the bay doors. To remove the cargo and passengers, we just do the reverse of what we did to put them in and subtract the weights from the load list. That's it, we're done for our first trip in Botswana in the Kodiak 100. There's an awful lot to this add-on, and some of which I haven't shown you. As I landed on dirt, I should have probably switched on the inertial separator. Oh well, that's for next time. SimWorks Studios Kodiak 100 gets my highest recommendation, and it's gonna be a favorite of mine. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you found this useful and informative. Stay well, look after yourself, see you again soon, and bye for now.